You moved to this country and somewhere along the way you stopped feeling like yourself. You go to work. You come home. You speak a language that is not your own. And on some nights, the quiet ones, when the flat feels too empty, you wonder if God even knows your address here. Because back home you knew how to pray. You knew how to worship. The church smelled familiar. The songs were in your language. And now you are in the UK, trying to build a life, and somewhere deep inside you are asking the same question a man asked 3,000 years ago by the rivers of Babylon: how can I sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Psalm 137 is the most honest psalm in the entire Bible. The people of Israel had been taken from everything they knew, their land, their temple, their culture, their language, and forced to live in a foreign empire. And the Babylonians, almost mockingly, said to them, "Sing us one of your songs. Sing us something from your homeland." And the Israelites wept. They hung their harps on the willow trees. They said, "We cannot do it. We cannot worship here. This is not the place. This is not the right moment. We are too far. We are too broken." If you have ever walked into a British church and felt invisible, if you have ever tried to pray and the words would not come, if you have ever missed your mum or your avo or your pastor back home so much that your chest physically hurt, you were living Psalm 137. And you were not failing at faith. You were being faithful to the truth of what exile feels like. Here is what the enemy wants you to believe: that God stayed back home. That God lives in the warmth of your homeland, in the familiar church, in your mother tongue. That the cold English weather and the grey skies and the awkward silences somehow put a wall between you and the divine. But the Israelites in Babylon discovered something extraordinary. They could not go to the temple. The temple no longer existed. Every physical structure they had associated with God was gone. And yet, God was there. Daniel prayed in Babylon. The book of Esther unfolds in a foreign palace. Ruth followed a God she had never grown up with into a land she had never seen. And every single one of them found that God was not bound by geography. The question was never whether God was present in the UK. The question was whether you would let yourself be present with God, here, now, in this specific city, in this specific season of your life. Because staying spiritually alive in exile is not about recreating what you had back home. It is about discovering who God is in this new chapter. I want to name 3 things that happen to almost every immigrant that nobody warns you about, because naming them is the first step to healing them. The first is identity fragmentation. When you move countries, you lose the social mirrors that told you who you were. Your name gets mispronounced. Your qualifications get questioned. Your accent becomes the first thing people notice. And you start building a new version of yourself, one that fits in here, and over time you can feel like you do not fully belong anywhere, not back home anymore, not fully here either. The second is spiritual dislocation. Your faith was built in community, in language, in cultural rhythms. When those disappear, faith can feel abstract, theoretical, hard to hold. The third is what psychologists call ambiguous loss, the grief that has no clear object. You did not lose a person who died. You lost a version of your life, a street, a smell, a Sunday routine. And that grief is real and valid, and it does not make you ungrateful for the life you are building here. Stay with me, because I want to show you what God does with all 3 of these things. There is a Portuguese word that does not fully translate into English: saudade. It is a longing, a melancholy tenderness for something or someone you love that is absent. It is the ache of a Sunday lunch that no longer happens. The voice on the phone that sounds too far away. The smell of food that cannot be replicated in a British supermarket. And I want to tell you something that might surprise you: saudade is not a spiritual weakness. It is a form of love. Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus before he raised him. He wept over Jerusalem before he entered it. The shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept, is not embarrassing theology. It is the Son of God modeling what it looks like to feel loss in a human body. Your saudade is not a sign that your faith is small. It is a sign that you love deeply. And God, who is love itself, understands that more than anyone. Bring it to Him. He will not tell you to get over it. He will sit with you in it. Now here is something the psalm does not tell you directly, but the rest of the Bible reveals. Babylon was hard, and Babylon was transformative. Joseph went to Egypt as a slave and became a man who saved nations. Daniel went to Babylon as a captive and became a man whose faith outlasted an empire. Esther was in a foreign palace with a hidden identity and became the person who preserved her entire people. The pattern is consistent. God does not waste the exile. The very things that feel like setbacks in a foreign country, the humility of starting over, the dependence you develop, the way you are forced to rely on God rather than your network, these are the conditions that produce a depth of character and faith that comfort never builds. I am not telling you the difficulty does not matter. I am telling you it is working something in you that could not be worked any other way. The question for you today is not whether God is using this season. The question is whether you are going to cooperate with it or resist it. Let me give you something practical. Because faith without practical grounding stays abstract. First, find your Babylon community. In the actual Babylon, the Israelites still gathered. Ezekiel prophesied to them in small groups. Ezra collected their stories. Find the Portuguese church, the Brazilian fellowship, the international congregation, the small group, any community where you do not have to translate your identity before you can worship. Second, keep the anchor practices. 1 psalm a day. Not a chapter. Not a study plan. 1 psalm. Read it slowly. Let it be your conversation with God before you open your phone in the morning. Third, write the new story. You are not in the UK by accident. The same God who had a specific plan for Ruth's life in Moab has a specific plan for your life in this country. You are here as a witness, as a builder, as a carrier of something your community here does not have yet. That is not a burden, it is a calling. Psalm 137 is a psalm of lament. But the entire book of Psalms is built on a principle that scholars call the movement from lament to praise. You are never meant to stay in the lament. The lament is the honest starting point. It is not the destination. The Israelites eventually returned. But more than that, while they were in Babylon, they wrote down the Torah. They codified their faith. They produced the Psalms. The very spiritual literature that has sustained billions of people across 4,000 years was largely shaped during exile. Your most difficult season may be producing your most enduring fruit. The version of you that the UK is creating is not a diminished version of who you were back home. It is a more refined, more resilient, more compassionate version if you let God work. And the song that you are learning to sing here, in a foreign land, in a strange language, in an unfamiliar cold, that song has power that a comfortable version of you never would have found. I want to close with a prayer. If you want to pray this silently as you listen, please do. Lord, I am far from home and some days that distance feels very heavy. I confess that I have sometimes wondered if you were still with me, if the faith I had back home still counts here, if my prayers still reach you from this city. Today I choose to believe that you are not bound by geography, that you are as present here as you were there. I bring you my Saudade, my longing for what I left behind, and I trust that you understand it. I bring you my fears about belonging, about identity, about the future. I bring you the weariness of being a stranger in a land that is still unfamiliar. And I receive from you what the psalmist eventually received, the knowledge that you have not forgotten me, that this chapter of my life is not a detour but a direction, and that I can sing your song here not because everything is easy, but because you are faithful. Let this exile produce in me something eternal. Amen. If this touched you today, share it with someone who is living far from home. And subscribe, because every week we come back to this space and choose faith over fear. We will see you next time.